Jack sat quietly in his small room, staring at the plans he had written down on a yellow notebook. He had big dreams, bigger than anything he had ever imagined before. He wanted to start a business, learn new skills, and become someone who could help others. Every night he would think about sharing his plans with his friends and family, hoping they would understand him and maybe even support him. But every time he imagined telling someone, a small voice in his head whispered, "Be careful. People don't always wish the best for you." He tried to ignore it, thinking it was just his fear talking. Jack remembered a time when he had shared a simple idea with a classmate back in school. He wanted to start a small project selling handmade bookmarks. At first, his classmate seemed excited and said, "That sounds amazing. You should do it." Jack felt happy and motivated, thinking he had found someone who believed in him. But over the next few days, he noticed his classmate talking to others about his idea. They laughed at it, joked about it, and even made fun of him in subtle ways. Jack felt embarrassed and frustrated. That experience had taught him a lesson, but he didn't fully understand its importance yet. Now, sitting in his room, he looked at his notebook again. He had detailed plans for the next 6 months, including learning new skills, working on small projects, and even saving money for his bigger goals. But the thought of telling someone else about these plans made him nervous. He realized that even the people he trusted the most might not fully understand his vision. Some might give advice that would confuse him. Others might discourage him without meaning to, and a few might even secretly hope he fails. Jack's excitement about his future was strong, but he knew he had to be careful. He decided to take a deep breath and make a choice. He would keep his plans private for now. He would work quietly, step by step, without letting others' opinions affect his progress. He understood that sharing too early could make his dreams fragile, like a glass that could break from a single careless touch. He promised himself that he would only share his plans when they were strong enough, when he had taken action, and when he had results to show. Jack began to work on his first small task. He made a list of daily actions that would move him closer to his goals. Even though it was a small start, he felt a sense of control and power. Each step he completed was a silent victory. He realized that action spoke louder than words, and that success needed to be built quietly before it could be shared. He also noticed something important. By focusing on himself instead of trying to impress others, he felt calmer, more focused, and more motivated. His energy wasn't being wasted on worrying about what others thought. As the sun began to rise, Jack looked out the window and felt a new kind of determination. He didn't need anyone to approve of his plans yet. He didn't need to explain himself or seek validation. All he needed was focus, persistence, and belief in his own ability to turn his dreams into reality. Jack smiled to himself, realizing that this was the first real step toward independence and success. Today, he wouldn't share his plan. Today, he would act. And with each action, his vision would grow stronger, and one day, he would share it with the world, fully prepared, unstoppable, and confident. Jack's journey had just begun, and he understood that the quiet work he did today would shape the extraordinary results of tomorrow. The next morning, Jack woke up early with a feeling of determination. He remembered the promise he had made to himself last night, to focus on action, not words. He opened his notebook again and reviewed his list of tasks for the day. Each task was small, but together they formed a path toward his larger goal. Jack understood that dreams were not built in a day, and sharing them too soon could bring unnecessary pressure or distractions. He started with something simple: organizing his workspace. Jack knew that a clean, organized environment would help him focus better. He sorted his materials, cleaned his desk, and made sure everything was ready for him to work efficiently. As he worked, he realized that these small actions, though seemingly ordinary, were the foundation of discipline. Discipline, he thought, was more important than motivation, because motivation could fade. But discipline kept you moving forward, even when things got hard. After setting up his space, Jack moved to the next task, learning a new skill that would help him in his future projects. He opened his computer and started watching tutorials, taking careful notes. He felt a mix of excitement and nervousness because he knew learning something new was challenging. But he also knew that growth came from stepping out of his comfort zone. He reminded himself that nobody would see this progress yet, and that was perfectly fine. Private work, he realized, was often the most powerful kind of work. Around noon, Jack took a break and reflected on his past experiences. He thought about the times he had shared his ideas too soon and how quickly those moments had turned sour. Each story of disappointment had taught him the importance of patience. He understood that people's reactions were not always predictable, and that sometimes even friends could unintentionally discourage you. Jack smiled, realizing that keeping plans private wasn't about secrecy or fear. It was about protecting his energy, focus, and vision until he was ready to make them real. After lunch, he returned to his tasks. He practiced a skill he had been working on for weeks, refining it, testing it, and improving little by little. Jack noticed that progress didn't always feel dramatic, but he reminded himself that slow, steady improvement was more valuable than flashy, temporary results. He also realized that when no one was watching, he could experiment freely, make mistakes, and learn from them without fear of judgment. This freedom, he understood, was the hidden advantage of keeping his plan to himself. By the evening, Jack had completed several tasks. He felt a sense of satisfaction that came not from praise or recognition, but from the knowledge that he had acted on his own vision. He understood that success was built in silence, long before it became visible to the world. Sharing a plan too early could create pressure, invite criticism, or even lead to sabotage, and he was determined to avoid that. Jack sat down again with his notebook and reflected on his day. He wrote down what he had learned. Small steps matter. Private work is powerful. Discipline is key. And patience is a secret weapon. He realized that every action he took quietly was preparing him for the moment when he would eventually share his achievements. When that day came, his plan wouldn't just be an idea, it would be a reality. As night fell, Jack felt a calm satisfaction. He understood that keeping plans private wasn't a limitation, but a strategy. It was a way to build strength, confidence, and mastery before facing the world. Jack knew that tomorrow would bring new tasks, challenges, and opportunities, and he was ready to face them, step by step, in silence, growing stronger with each quiet action. The next morning, Jack woke up feeling even more focused than the day before. He stretched, drank a glass of water, and reminded himself of his mission: to take action quietly, without seeking approval or validation from anyone. Today, he decided, he would challenge himself with something more difficult. He opened his notebook and looked at the list of tasks he had prepared. One item stood out: a project he had been postponing for weeks, because it felt too big, too complicated, and too risky. But Jack knew that growth lay on the other side of fear. He began by breaking the project into smaller, manageable steps. He wrote down each step carefully, making sure that it was clear, actionable, and measurable. Then he set a timeline for each part, not to pressure himself, but to create a structure. Jack realized that having a plan was important, but keeping it private was even more crucial. Sharing his project too early could lead to judgment, criticism, or distraction. He reminded himself that real achievement starts in silence. With dedication and consistent effort, Jack started working on the first small task. At first, it felt uncomfortable. He had been delaying it for so long that even a simple action seemed daunting. But he pushed through, reminding himself that progress was always uncomfortable at the beginning. Slowly, step by step, he completed it. Each small success fueled his confidence. He noticed that working quietly allowed him to focus deeply, without interruption, without the weight of others' expectations. Around midday, Jack took a short break. He walked outside, feeling the sun on his face and the wind against his skin. He thought about the people he knew who often shared their plans too early. They were full of ideas and excitement, but their ideas rarely became reality because the world had influenced them before they could act. Jack understood that not sharing his plan was not about hiding from the world, but about preparing himself to succeed on his own terms. Back at his desk, Jack tackled the next task. He concentrated on learning a new skill that would help him complete his project more efficiently. He read articles, watched tutorials, and practiced actively. He made mistakes and corrected them immediately. He realized that private work allowed him to experiment freely, to fail safely, and to improve faster than he ever could, with an audience watching. By late afternoon, Jack had completed 3 major steps of his project. He felt a sense of calm satisfaction. He did not need anyone to recognize his effort. The knowledge that he was making tangible progress was enough. Jack knew that real power came from action, not from talking about action. Each quiet step he took strengthened his skills, his focus, and his resilience. As evening approached, Jack reflected on his progress. He wrote in his notebook about what he had learned. Patience creates strength. Private action builds confidence. Small steps lead to big results, and fear is often a sign that growth is near. He realized that by keeping his plan to himself, he was not isolating himself. He was protecting his energy and creating a foundation for success. Jack went to bed that night feeling proud, calm, and determined. He understood that the journey was long, but every quiet, focused action brought him closer to his goal. He reminded himself that when the time came to reveal his plan, it would no longer be a dream. It would be a powerful reality, built in silence, with discipline, patience, and careful execution. The next day, Jack woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that consistency was key, and he was determined to keep moving forward quietly, without distraction. Today, he focused on a skill he had been avoiding because it felt uncomfortable: public speaking. Not to show anyone, but because mastering this skill would help him execute his plan more effectively in the future. Jack reminded himself that preparation in private builds confidence in public. He spent hours practicing his speech in front of a mirror, carefully observing his gestures, tone, and pauses. As he practiced, he realized that focusing on action rather than recognition was freeing. When no one was watching, he could make mistakes, adjust, and try again without fear. He understood that sharing his plan too early could invite unnecessary opinions that might confuse him or make him doubt himself. Quiet work allowed him to control his growth. Jack took notes about his improvements and identified the areas he needed to refine. Each small adjustment brought him closer to mastery, and he felt a quiet sense of pride that no one else would witness. But that was enough. After practicing, Jack decided to tackle another part of his project: researching opportunities and potential challenges. He spent hours reading, analyzing, and mapping out potential obstacles. Jack realized that by keeping his plan private, he could experiment without judgment, explore new ideas freely, and create solutions without outside interference. He made a detailed list of steps, resources, and strategies. He labeled each step with a priority and a time frame, understanding that structure would allow him to move faster and smarter. In the afternoon, Jack faced a challenge. One of his tasks seemed much harder than he anticipated. Doubts crept in, and he felt the temptation to talk to someone about it for advice. But he paused, took a deep breath, and reminded himself of the power of silence. He realized that talking about problems too early often dilutes the focus and slows progress. Instead, he concentrated on breaking the task into smaller, manageable parts. He approached each piece methodically, experimenting and adjusting as he went. Step by step, he overcame the difficulty. As evening approached, Jack reviewed his progress. He noticed that even though he hadn't shared a word about his project, he was advancing faster than he had imagined. The silence allowed him to concentrate deeply, refine his skills, and make decisions independently. He recognized that many people around him sought validation before acting, which slowed their growth. Jack felt grateful that he had chosen a different path: action in private, results in public. Before going to bed, Jack reflected on the lessons of the day. He wrote in his notebook: focus on action, value your time, brace challenges, and grow silently. He understood that the world often discourages those who act quietly because it is easier to see what others are doing than to look inward and work consistently. But Jack had discovered that private discipline and persistence create unstoppable power. Finally, Jack went to sleep knowing that each day of quiet effort was building a foundation for future success. He felt calm, determined, and motivated to continue his journey. He reminded himself that one day, when the results were visible, no explanation or apology would be needed. The work done in silence would speak for itself, and the world would see the strength, discipline, and dedication he had cultivated in private. The next morning, Jack woke up early with the sun barely rising above the horizon. The world was quiet, and he felt a sense of calm that only comes from working in secret, free from distractions and opinions. Today, he decided to focus on learning a new skill that could accelerate his progress, critical thinking, and decision-making. He knew that understanding how to evaluate situations and make smart choices was essential if he wanted his plan to succeed. Jack pulled out his notebook and started analyzing past decisions he had made, noting where he had gone wrong and where he had excelled. He realized that most mistakes come from external influences, listening to too many voices, seeking approval, and sharing plans prematurely. By keeping his actions private, he could experiment, fail, and learn without fear. Jack spent hours solving exercises, reading case studies, and imagining hypothetical scenarios. He visualized possible outcomes and wrote down strategies for each. He understood that silent preparation was the key to confidence. The more he practiced in private, the sharper his mind became, and the clearer his vision for the future felt. During the afternoon, Jack faced a moment of doubt. A friend had casually asked him about his plans, and Jack felt the urge to share just a small part. But he remembered the lessons of the past days. Sharing prematurely could lead to misunderstanding, criticism, or even discouragement. Instead, he smiled politely and changed the subject, redirecting his energy back to work. He realized that discipline in silence was not just about hiding plans, but about protecting focus and momentum. Jack then decided to tackle a complex problem in his project. It required creativity, patience, and perseverance. He broke the challenge into smaller pieces, approached each piece methodically, and experimented with different solutions. Every time he encountered a setback, he reminded himself that setbacks were learning opportunities, not failures. He documented everything carefully in his notebook, knowing that each insight would compound over time and make him stronger. As evening approached, Jack reflected on the lessons of the day. He realized that progress was not always visible to others, and that was the beauty of it. Working quietly, without seeking praise or recognition, allowed him to refine his skills, build resilience, and strengthen his character. He wrote a note to himself: "The work done in silence creates power in public. Patience, discipline, and focus are stronger than approval or applause." Before going to bed, Jack felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Though no one knew the work he had done, he knew that each hour of effort was moving him closer to his goal. He had learned that success is rarely instant or public, but the foundation, built in private, would eventually become unstoppable. Jack understood that life rewards those who prepare quietly and act strategically. He slept with a calm mind, knowing that his plan was growing stronger every day, and that the day would come when all the effort he had poured into silence would shine brightly in the world. The next morning, Jack woke up early with the sun barely rising above the horizon. The world was quiet, and he felt a sense of calm that only comes from working in secret, free from distractions and opinions. Today, he decided to focus on learning a new skill that could accelerate his progress, critical thinking, and decision-making. He knew that understanding how to evaluate situations and make smart choices was essential if he wanted his plan to succeed. Jack pulled out his notebook and started analyzing past decisions he had made, noting where he had gone wrong and where he had excelled. He realized that most mistakes come from external influences, listening to too many voices, seeking approval, and sharing plans prematurely. By keeping his actions private, he could experiment, fail, and learn without fear. Jack spent hours solving exercises, reading case studies, and imagining hypothetical scenarios. He visualized possible outcomes and wrote down strategies for each. He understood that silent preparation was the key to confidence. The more he practiced in private, the sharper his mind became, and the clearer his vision for the future felt. During the afternoon, Jack faced a moment of doubt. A friend had casually asked him about his plans, and Jack felt the urge to share just a small part. But he remembered the lessons of the past days. Sharing prematurely could lead to misunderstanding, criticism, or even discouragement. Instead, he smiled politely and changed the subject, redirecting his energy back to work. He realized that discipline in silence was not just about hiding plans, but about protecting focus and momentum. Jack then decided to tackle a complex problem in his project. It required creativity, patience, and perseverance. He broke the challenge into smaller pieces, approached each piece methodically, and experimented with different solutions. Every time he encountered a setback, he reminded himself that setbacks were learning opportunities, not failures. He documented everything carefully in his notebook, knowing that each insight would compound over time and make him stronger. As evening approached, Jack reflected on the lessons of the day. He realized that progress was not always visible to others, and that was the beauty of it. Working quietly, without seeking praise or recognition, allowed him to refine his skills, build resilience, and strengthen his character. He wrote a note to himself: "The work done in silence creates power in public. Patience, discipline, and focus are stronger than approval or applause." Before going to bed, Jack felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Though no one knew the work he had done, he knew that each hour of effort was moving him closer to his goal. He had learned that success is rarely instant or public, but the foundation, built in private, would eventually become unstoppable. Jack understood that life rewards those who prepare quietly and act strategically. He slept with a calm mind, knowing that his plan was growing stronger every day, and that the day would come when all the effort he had poured into silence would shine brightly in the world. The next day, Jack woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that preparation alone was not enough, and that today he had to push himself further than ever before. The quiet mornings of planning and studying had built a strong foundation, but now it was time to test his skills. In a more challenging situation, Jack reminded himself that progress is earned through effort and persistence, and that fear was just a signal that he was growing. He started his day by reviewing the progress he had made so far. Each completed task, each small insight, and each private victory reinforced his confidence. Jack realized that one of the biggest obstacles people face is impatience. They want to show results immediately. They want praise and recognition before the work is done. Jack understood that real growth happens quietly and steadily. The more he focused on action and less on validation, the stronger and more capable he became. Mid-morning came, and Jack encountered a complex problem that tested both his patience and his skills. At first, he felt overwhelmed by the challenge, but then he reminded himself to break the problem into smaller parts. He carefully analyzed each piece, experimented with different solutions, and observed the results. Every failed attempt was not a failure, but a lesson. Jack documented everything in detail, noting patterns, mistakes, and improvements. He knew that knowledge gained from experience was far more valuable than advice from others or shortcuts. As the afternoon progressed, Jack noticed how easy it was to get distracted by unnecessary thoughts about what others were doing or achieving. He caught himself comparing his progress to imagined standards and immediately stopped. Jack understood that comparison was a thief of joy and a trap that could derail even the most disciplined person. He refocused on his own work, his own growth, and the actions that he could control. Each step he took, no matter how small, brought him closer to mastery and reinforced the idea that consistency beats speed and quality beats quantity. Evening arrived, and Jack reflected on the lessons of the day. He felt proud of the effort he had put in quietly, without seeking validation. He realized that the power of silent action was not only in building skills, but in cultivating resilience, patience, and self-discipline. He wrote in his notebook, "Today I faced challenges I could not avoid. I acted despite fear. I focused despite distractions. I grew quietly and built strength that no one can take away. Before going to bed, Jack felt a deep sense of calm and accomplishment. He knew the journey ahead would require even more persistence, but he was ready. Each day of private effort strengthened him, prepared him for challenges, and brought him closer to his ultimate goal. Jack understood that action, focus, and silent discipline were the true keys to success. The night was quiet, but inside him, he felt a growing power fueled by determination, preparation, and unwavering focus. Jack woke up early with the sun just beginning to rise. Today felt different. He could feel the momentum he had been building over the past days. The quiet efforts, the small victories, and the disciplined focus creating a strong current carrying him forward. He reminded himself that consistency was more powerful than motivation, and that every small action, repeated day after day, compounded into extraordinary results. He began his morning reviewing the work he had done in previous days. The notebook he kept was filled with notes, observations, and lessons. Each page reminded him of how much he had learned and how far he had come. Without anyone noticing, Jack understood that private effort was a secret weapon, allowing him to experiment, make mistakes, and improve without pressure or judgment. The confidence he felt now was built on action, not applause. Mid-morning, he decided to tackle a new challenge. This task required creativity, patience, and problem-solving skills he had only recently begun developing. At first, the problem seemed overwhelming. Jack felt the familiar tug of doubt, wondering if he was capable of handling it. But he reminded himself that growth comes when we face difficulties head-on, and that fear is a sign that we are moving beyond our comfort zone. He broke the problem into manageable steps, approached each carefully, and observed the outcomes. Every failure became a lesson, and every small success built his confidence. During the afternoon, Jack faced moments of temptation to rush or to look for shortcuts. He knew the world often rewards speed over depth, but he also knew that true skill comes from doing things properly and thoroughly. He resisted the temptation to take the easy path, choosing instead to focus on learning deeply and doing the work well. He experimented with different approaches, reflected on the results, and adjusted his strategy. Jack understood that mastery is not about instant success, but about thoughtful, consistent effort over time. As evening approached, Jack paused to reflect on the lessons of the day. He realized that silent, focused action was creating not only skill and knowledge, but also resilience and self-discipline. He wrote in his notebook, "Today, I acted despite fear. Today I focused despite distractions. Today I built strength quietly. Tomorrow I will continue and grow stronger." Jack felt satisfaction, knowing that each day of effort was a step forward, that no one could see it yet, and that the work done in silence was far more powerful than any public display of effort. Before going to bed, Jack felt calm and energized. He knew that the challenges ahead would be even greater, but he was ready. His skills, focus, and determination were growing steadily and silently. He had learned that the true power of success lies not in talking about plans, but in executing them quietly and consistently. The world outside could wait. Inside, he was building something unshakable, something that would eventually shine brightly for all to see. Jack woke up feeling a quiet determination. The momentum from the past week carried him forward, and he knew that the path he was on was different from most. While others were talking about their plans and seeking approval, he had been building skills quietly, making progress unseen, but steady. Today, he reminded himself that success is born from action, not words, and that each small step adds up over time to create remarkable results. He began his morning reviewing the work he had accomplished so far. His notebook was filled with details about what worked, what didn't, and lessons he had learned. Every note reminded him that action in silence is more powerful than talking about intentions. Jack smiled, realizing that this quiet work had strengthened not only his abilities, but also his patience and self-discipline. He was building something that could not be shaken by criticism or comparison. Mid-morning, Jack encountered a challenge that required him to think creatively, and adapt quickly. At first, he felt uncertainty creeping in, the doubt that often accompanies new and difficult tasks. But Jack remembered that discomfort is a signal of growth, not failure. He approached the problem step by step, analyzing every angle and trying different methods. Every attempt, whether successful or not, provided valuable insight. He documented each decision carefully, knowing that this record would be invaluable for future steps. During the afternoon, Jack noticed how easy it would be to compare himself to others. He remembered the temptation to check social media, to see what people were doing, and to measure his progress against theirs. But he stopped himself. Comparison is the thief of joy, he thought. His journey was his own. He focused on the work in front of him, the actions he could control, and the habits he could cultivate. Every small success built confidence and reinforced the importance of consistent, focused effort. Evening arrived, and Jack reflected on the day. He wrote in his notebook, "Today, I acted despite fear. Today I focused despite distractions. Today I learned through effort. Tomorrow I will continue. Each day I grow stronger." Quietly, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that real progress often goes unseen. The quiet discipline he practiced was creating skills, resilience, and confidence that no one could take away. Before going to bed, Jack reminded himself that the journey was long and challenges would continue. But the silent work he had been doing gave him power and control over his own path. He had learned that real success is built on action, focus, patience, and consistency. The world could talk about plans all it wanted. Jack knew that the work done quietly and persistently always speaks louder in the end than any words ever could. Jack woke up with a sense of quiet excitement. He had learned that the real power of action comes from consistency and persistence, not from immediate recognition. The momentum he had been building over the past days gave him confidence. But he reminded himself that confidence is earned, not given. Every small effort, every careful decision, and every lesson learned added to his growing strength and capability. He began his morning by reviewing his notebook, reflecting on the small victories and the lessons from failures. Jack understood that success is not about perfection, but about progress. Each mistake he made was not a setback, but a guide for improvement. He wrote detailed notes about what worked, what didn't, and how to approach challenges differently next time. This practice gave him clarity and helped him avoid repeating the same mistakes. By mid-morning, Jack faced a complex task that required both patience and creativity. He felt the familiar tension of uncertainty, but reminded himself that growth lies on the other side of discomfort. Jack broke the task into manageable parts, focusing on one step at a time. He experimented, observed the results, and adjusted his methods carefully. Every attempt, whether successful or not, was a lesson in resilience and adaptability. In the afternoon, Jack felt the temptation to compare his progress to others. He knew that many people seek validation and recognition, but he had learned that comparison only slows growth and steals peace of mind. He focused instead on his own work, his own goals, and the actions he could control. Every deliberate action built skills, confidence, and resilience. Jack realized that silent effort is more powerful than public display, and that true growth often goes unnoticed until it culminates in extraordinary results. Evening came, and Jack reflected on his day. He wrote in his notebook, "Today, I acted despite fear. Today I focused despite distractions. Today I learned through effort and persistence. Tomorrow I will continue. I grow stronger quietly and steadily." He felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that real progress often happens in silence, and that the habits he was forming would last a lifetime. Before bed, Jack reminded himself that the journey was long, and the challenges ahead would grow tougher. But the silent work he had been doing gave him strength, focus, and control over his own path. He knew that the consistent effort, patience, and self-discipline he practiced would eventually create success for greater than any shortcut or recognition could provide. Jack understood that true mastery comes from dedication and quiet persistence, and that the actions taken today shape the person he will become tomorrow. Jack woke up before dawn with a calm determination. The quiet hours of the morning had become his favorite time. He knew that the world was often noisy, full of distractions, opinions, and comparisons. But the early morning was his sanctuary. It was a time to focus on action, reflection, and planning without interruption. Jack believed that discipline in small, consistent steps creates momentum that nothing else can match. He started his morning by revisiting his previous work. His notebook was filled with lessons, reflections, and insights. Each page reminded him of how far he had come and how much effort he had invested quietly. Jack smiled, knowing that real growth doesn't need applause or recognition. The skills he built, the focus he cultivated, and the resilience he developed were all happening silently but powerfully. He understood that the habit of consistent effort is more valuable than fleeting motivation or public praise. Mid-morning brought a complex challenge. Jack had to solve a problem that required both creativity and careful thinking. At first, he felt hesitation and doubt, a reminder of how challenging growth can be. But Jack faced the discomfort calmly, knowing that fear is a signal of growth, not failure. He broke the problem into smaller steps, experimenting with different approaches and observing the results. Each small attempt, whether successful or not, was a lesson, a building block toward mastery. As the afternoon arrived, Jack felt a subtle urge to check on others' progress. Social media and external comparisons often tempt people to measure themselves against others. But Jack resisted. He reminded himself that comparison is the thief of joy and progress. His journey was unique, his growth, his own. He focused instead on what he could control, his actions, habits, and learning. Each deliberate effort added strength to his skills and confidence. Jack realized that private, consistent work creates results that no public display can match. Evening came, and Jack reflected on the day. He wrote in his notebook, "Today, I acted despite fear. Today I focused despite distractions. Today, I grew quietly through consistent effort. Tomorrow I continue. My progress is steady and unstoppable." He felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that true success comes from patience, persistence, and deliberate practice. Jack knew that the small, invisible efforts he made today would compound into extraordinary results in the future. Before going to bed, Jack reminded himself that the path ahead would not always be easy. Challenges would grow, distractions would tempt him, and fear would appear. But he was ready. The discipline, focus, and habits he had cultivated quietly over time gave him strength. He understood that true success is built on the foundation of consistent, silent action, and that the person he was becoming each day would ultimately achieve more than he ever imagined. Jack woke up with a strong sense of purpose. Each morning reminded him that real change is created by consistent action and focused effort, not by talking or seeking approval. He had seen people around him waste time worrying about what others thought or comparing themselves to someone else's progress. Jack had learned the hard way that such comparisons only steal energy and clarity. Today, he chose to act with intention, to focus on the things he could control, and to grow quietly. He began the day by reviewing his notes. Every page told a story of effort, lessons learned, and small victories. Jack understood that progress was built from repetition, discipline, and reflection. He reminded himself that the journey is not about instant recognition or applause. Every effort that goes unnoticed is still shaping the person he is becoming. Even small improvements, compounded over time, create massive results. As the morning continued, Jack faced a series of challenges that tested his patience and creativity. Some tasks were frustrating, and others seemed impossible at first glance. Jack refused to be discouraged. He knew that growth occurs when one steps into discomfort rather than avoiding it. He broke down each challenge into manageable parts, tackling one small step at a time. Every attempt, whether successful or not, was a lesson in persistence and adaptability. He reminded himself that mistakes are not failures, but guides, pointing the way forward. By afternoon, Jack focused on refining his skills. He practiced, experimented, and pushed himself beyond his comfort zone. He understood that skill building is a marathon, not a sprint. Consistent effort, even when it feels slow or boring, compounds into strength, confidence, and capability. He avoided distractions and refused to compare himself to others. Jack knew that the secret to progress is focusing on your own path, measuring growth against yourself, and letting others follow their journey without letting it influence you. Evening arrived, and Jack took a quiet moment to reflect. He wrote in his notebook, "Today, I acted with focus and patience. Today, I grew quietly and consistently. Each step I take builds strength I cannot yet fully see. Tomorrow I continue my journey with discipline and clarity." He felt satisfaction, knowing that invisible effort is often the most powerful. He had built the habit of acting consistently, of learning from experience, and of trusting the process. Before sleep, Jack reminded himself that the journey ahead would continue to challenge him, but that he was becoming stronger every day. He understood that true mastery comes not from showing off, but from persistent, private work. His quiet focus, his habits, and his reflection would ultimately lead to success, far beyond what applause or recognition could offer. Jack woke up with determination. The quiet power of discipline had become his closest companion. He understood that action is more important than talk, that progress is more important than praise, and that the journey itself teaches more than any outcome. Jack knew that each day spent focused on growth and learning was a day invested in the life he wanted to create. He began by revisiting his notebook, reviewing lessons from past experiences. Each entry reminded him of the mistakes he had made, the insights he had gained, and the incremental progress he had achieved. Jack realized that consistent effort, reflection, and adaptation were shaping him into someone capable of achieving goals that seemed impossible before. The journey was quiet, but powerful. He had learned to value patience and persistence above instant gratification. Mid-morning brought challenges. Jack faced problems that seemed complicated and discouraging. He resisted the temptation to give up or to rush. He reminded himself that growth comes from working through difficulties step by step, learning from each mistake, and persisting with focus. He broke down every problem into small, manageable actions. Each completed step was a reinforcement of confidence and competence. Jack understood that even when progress is invisible to others, it is building strength internally. During the afternoon, Jack felt the pull of distraction. He noticed that some peers were talking about their successes, sharing their plans, and seeking validation online. Jack smiled and looked away. Comparison is a thief, he thought. The journey is personal, and the work that matters is the work done quietly, consistently, and with attention. He focused on refining his skills, learning, and taking action, knowing that this discipline would compound into long-term results. Evening arrived, and Jack took time to reflect on the day. He wrote in his notebook, "Today, I focused on progress, not recognition. Today I acted despite fear. Today I strengthened skills and patience. Tomorrow I continue building quietly." He felt satisfaction, knowing that the small, invisible actions he performed were creating a foundation stronger than any shortcut or public praise could ever offer. Before bed, Jack reminded himself that the path forward would not always be easy. Challenges would continue, distractions would tempt him, and fear would appear. But the quiet work he had invested over time gave him strength and clarity. He understood that the journey to success is rarely public, but always rewarding. Every day of disciplined effort, reflection, and growth brought him closer to the life he envisioned, and he was ready to continue building his future. Quietly, persistently, and powerfully, Jack woke up with a quiet determination. He had learned that real success is built in the shadows, away from distractions, comparisons, and noise. Every morning reminded him that discipline, focus, and consistent action are the foundations of growth. Jack understood that talent alone is not enough. It is the daily choices, the small actions repeated every day, that shape a future of achievement and fulfillment. He started his day by reviewing his notes and goals. Each line in his notebook was a reminder of lessons learned, mistakes overcome, and progress made. Jack smiled as he reflected on how far he had come. Progress is rarely visible to the world, he thought, but it is deeply felt internally. Every decision to act, every challenge faced, and every skill practiced added invisible strength that would carry him further than any shortcuts or quick rewards ever could. As the morning progressed, Jack encountered problems that required patience and creativity. He broke each challenge into manageable steps and tackled them one by one. When fear or doubt appeared, he acknowledged it without judgment and continued. Jack knew that growth occurs when you face discomfort, not when you avoid it. Each small victory reinforced his confidence, teaching him that perseverance and consistency are far more powerful than bursts of motivation or external validation. By afternoon, Jack focused on refining his skills. He practiced and experimented, understanding that mastery requires repetition and deliberate effort. The urge to compare himself to others came briefly, but he reminded himself that comparison steals peace and focus. His journey was unique, and his progress was measured against his own standards. Every quiet, disciplined step contributed to long-term growth and strength. Evening arrived, and Jack reflected on the day. He wrote in his notebook, "Today, I acted consistently. Today I grew quietly. Tomorrow I continue." Progress is invisible, but powerful. Patience and effort compound into strength. He felt satisfaction knowing that the work he was doing silently would produce results that no applause or recognition could match. Jack understood that the journey to success is rarely public, but always transformative. Jack woke up with energy and clarity. The lessons of previous days reminded him that the journey of growth is built on consistent action and focus. Real success is not about showing off plans or seeking approval. It is about doing the work, learning from mistakes, and moving forward, silently but purposefully. Jack had embraced the quiet discipline of acting without distraction and without the need for recognition. He began the day by reviewing his previous work. His notebook contained reflections, insights, and lessons learned from countless challenges. Each page reminded him that effort matters more than talent, persistence more than instant success, and consistency more than visibility. Jack understood that success comes to those who focus on their own path, rather than comparing themselves to others. Morning brought a series of challenges that tested Jack's patience and creativity. Each obstacle required careful thought, trial and error, and persistence. Jack approached them step by step, breaking each task into smaller, achievable actions. Fear appeared, but did not stop him. He acknowledged it and continued, knowing that growth comes from facing challenges, not avoiding them. Every small action added to his skills, confidence, and resilience. By afternoon, Jack concentrated on skill building and learning. He practiced with focus, avoided distractions, and resisted the temptation to seek validation or compare himself to others. Jack knew that the quiet, consistent work done daily is far more powerful than bursts of effort or public recognition. His patience, reflection, and disciplined effort were building an invisible foundation that would sustain him for years. Evening came, and Jack reflected on the day. He wrote, "Today grew through action. Today I learned through patience. Today I strengthened my focus and habits. Tomorrow I continue." Quietly and consistently, he felt satisfaction knowing that real growth is often invisible, that discipline and effort compound over time, and that the silent work he did today would create extraordinary results in the future. Jack had embraced the path of quiet, persistent growth and was ready to continue building his life step by step, action by action, without distractions or comparisons. Jack woke up feeling stronger than ever. The previous days of consistent effort had built something inside him that no one could take away. He realized that small daily actions, repeated without seeking attention, were far more powerful than bursts of energy or public approval. His confidence was quiet but steady. He focused on his goals and habits, knowing that true success grows invisibly over time. Morning came, and Jack reviewed his daily plan. He did not rush. He did not compare himself to others. Every step he took was deliberate. Every choice, no matter how small, mattered. Jack understood that life is a collection of tiny decisions and persistent actions. Growth is not dramatic. It is gradual, steady, and often invisible. Challenges arose, as they always do. Some tasks were difficult, some people distracted him, and sometimes doubt crept in. But Jack did not give up. He approached each challenge with patience and calm. He experimented, made mistakes, and learned from them. Each lesson strengthened his mind, sharpened his skills, and deepened his understanding. By afternoon, Jack focused on practicing what he learned. He refined his English, worked on personal skills, and reinforced habits that aligned with his goals. He avoided distractions, social comparison, and unnecessary opinions. He had learned that what matters most is not what others see, but what he builds inside himself. Every single day, evening arrived, and Jack reflected quietly. He wrote in his notebook, "Today, I acted with focus. Today I grew silently. Tomorrow I continue. My progress is steady and unstoppable." He felt calm and satisfied, knowing that the power of consistency and self-discipline would carry him farther than he had ever imagined. Jack woke up with determination. He had learned to protect his focus, his energy, and his peace. Comparison was no longer a temptation. He understood that the only person to compete with was himself. Yesterday, each day was an opportunity to improve, to learn, and to grow. Jack's quiet habits were producing visible changes inside him, even if the world could not see them yet. He spent the morning reflecting on his goals. He created small tasks that aligned with long-term results. He knew that mastery is not achieved in a day. It is built step by step, minute by minute, choice by choice. Jack felt gratitude for the slow progress, because he knew that slow growth is stronger and lasts longer. Afternoon brought distractions and minor setbacks. Notifications, opinions, and interruptions tried to pull him away from focus. But Jack was prepared. He breathed, refocused, and continued working. Each small victory over distraction reinforced his self-discipline. Every challenge he overcame silently built his confidence and resilience. Evening came, and Jack recorded his thoughts. Today I faced distractions. Today I chose focus. Today I grew quietly. Tomorrow, continue with clarity and patience. He smiled, knowing that the invisible work he was doing would eventually lead to visible results. Jack woke up knowing that patience is key. He reviewed his long-term vision and reminded himself that consistent effort creates results that no short-term distraction can undo. Each small habit, each deliberate action, and each moment of focus compounded to create exponential growth. He approached the day with calm, careful attention to tasks that mattered most. Even when mistakes happened, Jack saw them as feedback, not failure. Each lesson strengthened him, each challenge refined him, and each decision to act quietly brought him closer to mastery. Jack also spent time helping a friend, sharing his experiences without boasting. He understood that teaching and guiding others is a way to solidify knowledge and inspire positive action. He did not need recognition. The satisfaction came from knowing he was contributing value while growing silently himself. Evening arrived. Jack reflected. Today I acted with patience. Today I learned from mistakes. Today I strengthened my focus. Tomorrow I continue. Peace filled him. He had embraced the quiet power of consistency, patience, and focus. Jack woke up calm and determined. The years ahead were full of possibilities. He knew that every habit he built today would shape the person he became tomorrow. His focus, discipline, and self-awareness were now stronger than ever. Jack also realized that life is a journey of small wins, daily progress, and quiet victories. He spent the day acting on his goals with clarity and purpose. Each task, no matter how simple, was done deliberately. He practiced English, learned new skills, and reflected on personal growth. Jack understood that the visible results of effort may take time to appear, but the internal transformation was already happening. Afternoon and evening were dedicated to reflection, planning, and personal growth. Jack documented lessons, mistakes, and insights. He smiled knowing that real success is not about recognition, but about becoming the best version of yourself. Jack woke up one final day of this story knowing that the journey never truly ends. Growth is lifelong, but the habits he had built, the focus he had cultivated, and the resilience he had earned made him ready for anything. He had learned that comparing himself to others steals peace, that silent, consistent action builds unstoppable strength, and that patience and discipline are the true keys to success. He reflected on his journey and smiled. The small steps, repeated every day, had created a transformation invisible to the world, but undeniable to him. Jack now understood that the real power lies in self-discipline, focus, and quiet action. And now, he looked at the camera, speaking directly to you. Your journey starts today. Focus on your own path. Act daily. Build habits. Learn, grow, and never stop. Do not compare yourself to others. Your only competition is yourself. Yesterday, start your quiet journey of growth and watch how your life transforms. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more life-changing stories and practical tips. Keep growing, keep acting, and never stop learning.